This is the second part of the lecture we are giving on crowdsourcing for multimedia applications. First, I start with the definition, some history, platforms, especially Amazon Mechanical Turk. I will talk about the motivation of the workers or online workers, some considerations in working with crowds, applications in multimedia briefly, and then summary. I try to keep it brief and then not to make it too boring. I start with the definition and introduction. So crowdsourcing, how did it start? It starts from the fact that if we have a bunch of people together, that they make decisions independently from each other, then we can get a good, if we average their responses, then we can get a very good response with some assumptions that they all have some knowledge about the topic and they are not influenced by each other. So you might know that, for instance, if you show an object and ask some people, a bunch of people, to independently guess how much the object weighs, the average guess is better than the expert's guess. But if they are influenced by each other and there are people who are more dominant and they actually say something other people will follow, and then that bias leads into some kind of inconsistency and not getting what we expect from wisdom of crowd. So how we see crowdsourcing, we see it as a means of solving problems. So from we as multimedia researchers or multimedia analysis people, it's a tool. And usually we use it for problems that are easy for human but difficult for computers. Examples are image tagging, design and creativity, and things like that. And usually we go for tasks that we know that they are easy to be solved by general public people, the non-experts, let's say, group, but extremely difficult still with the current state-of-the-art algorithms. So you might know that humans were used to be the computational units of the old computers when we didn't have the conventional computers of these days. A famous example is in the late 18th century. Hairdressers who lost their job during French Revolution were hired by Dauphiny to build logarithmic tables. They could only do addition and subtraction, but that was enough with some cross-check and verification in place to make some larger scale calculations. And another famous example is Manhattan Project, that in World War II they wanted to actually accelerate the development of the nuclear weapon, and then they hired mostly ladies because they were short of men who were in France to do the calculations manually. And later they even set up more sophisticated human computing, let's say, human computation departments, like the one National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, where they had these people whose job was to do the calculations, and with doing cross-checks they could get results. So let's look at the recent examples of at the things we call crowdsourcing. So you might have heard about Foldit or Galaxy Zoo. So these two are, for instance, examples of where researchers took advantage of volunteers to somehow people who are interested in research, or they want to play a little bit of game, or they want some brain teasers to come and do these small puzzles. So in Foldit, for instance, people fold different proteins together, the amino acids, to form new forms of proteins, and then biologists can look at those new proteins and see what they can be used for. Or in Galaxy Zoo, people just classify different galaxies that are captured by telescopes. And even though we have good classifiers, they're still not as good as human. So this way they could they could classify a large number of galaxies by the help of general public. On the other hand, we have the monetized form of crowdsourcing, which is giving tasks to people and actually compensating for what they do. A very famous example is Amazon Mechanical Turk. There are also other ones like Crowdflower or Clickworker, which is a German one, Odesk, which is another one that online workers are paid per hour, and usually they do kind of replace the conventional admin workers. Or there are other examples like 10EQS, where people actually give specific consultancy, like when somebody is seeking, for instance, for an expert on thermodynamics, they can go there and ask for an expert, and then pay the person for the task that they are looking for. A very famous example that you might have heard of was the search campaign for Jim Gray, who was a computer scientist who went missing in 2007 when he was sailing. So when he went missing, a campaign was started to spot his boat from satellite images. But it was a massive scale. It couldn't be done by a handful of people. So what they did was that they released these images on Amazon Mechanical Turk and asked volunteers and people to sign up and look at those images and try to spot his boat. Unfortunately, it didn't succeed, but it set the ground for further research, and it also caught the attention to what this kind of crowdsourcing and massive scale can be useful for. We can't talk about crowdsourcing without mentioning Fonan's work and what he did, which was kind of gamification. So he started by this ESP image labeling game. The ESP image labeling game was a game that a multiplayer game that the players were labeling each image, and that way they could come up with new concepts or annotations for those images. This was acquired by Google. It was used to label the images that they want to use in image search. Another example is reCAPTCHA, another example of his work where it's still being used to verify human users from robots. For instance, when you go sign up on a website and the website wants to actually verify you're a real human, it gives you these words, sometimes in kind of a distorted way. And usually one of those words has a ground truth already discovered text or term or whatever that the OCR found. But the other one is still not verified. So what they do is that they give it to a certain number of people, and after some repetitions and redundancy, then they can be certain that what they get from people is completely correct, and then they will add it to the ground truth set. So that way they are actually converting a massive scale of OCR or the OCR old books into digital format. And his recent work, Duolingo, which is helping to translate the web. For instance, we know that there's this kind of unbalance between different languages in Wikipedia, and this way we could enrich the content on the web on the languages that they don't have as much web presence as, for instance, English. And at the same time, people can learn a new language. So as I mentioned, there are different platforms out there. Amazon Mechanical Turk is a famous one. Crowdflower is another one that also distributes your tasks into different platforms and also has some verifications in place. Clickworker is a European, a German one. Another example is SamaSource, which actually gets tasks from people and give it to workers or online workers in refugee camps. So it's kind of a charity uh, crowdsourcing platform to help and enable them to get a job and have some income. Odesk, as I mentioned, this is a platform that distributes or somehow gives away, outsources admin work, and since the requesters are paying per hour, they can ask to receive the snapshot of the screen of the worker for every minute or every couple of minutes, and they can even ask if they receive the consent to capture the worker when he's working or she's working from his or her webcam every now and then. This way they can be sure that the person is not playing on Facebook and the person is actually doing the job. One important difference between Odesk and Amazon Mechanical Turk or Crowdflower is that on Odesk the crowd workers are not anonymous. On Mechanical Turk, if you as a requester, if you go and give some task, you only see your workers as some anonymized worker IDs. While on Odesk, you actually know who the person is, and that somehow reduces the number of cheaters or spammers. There are other examples like vWorker, which used to be Rent-A-Coder to outsource small coding work, Elance, Do My Stuff, and I'm sure tons of other ones. So let's look at the studies on demography of online workers. So we look at what was studied on Mechanical Turk, which is more of a larger scale one. And this is really like Mechanical Turk is really a platform for piecemeal work. They found in 2008, it was found by can't pronounce his name, Ipe Tortus, that the online workers and Mechanical Turks were mostly female and were mostly from the US. And it was not their main source of income because it's really the money that is paid for the tasks is not that much. The reason was that back then they were only giving money away, like out of the accounts, only in the US and into India. But it changed. I think I'm not sure if they were transferring money in India back then, but maybe they started in 2008. And in 2010, they found that it's changing. So it changed. The demography changed from people who were mostly bored and they were sitting at home and they wanted to do just something, to people who were more of like professional Turkers. Because then they started paying out money instead of Amazon credit to more people in developing countries like in Philippines or India, and then it somehow changed the demography. In 2010, they found that 34% of the workers are from India, and unlike America, they were mostly male, and some of them they were actually using Mechanical Turk to earn their bread and butter. Another finding from Odesk with the same guy was that he found that it becomes like this kind of online work becomes so important for people that they even like adjust their circadian rhythm to US time zones where their requesters are, so they don't sleep. So when he looked at different countries, he found that in Philippines the workers, they never sleep, so they are always present. It means that some of them, a large number of them, they adjust themselves to the requester's time zone. It was interesting. Kind of shows the significance. If you want to think about using these platforms or like finding a good strategy, we should also think about the motivation and incentives of people doing the tasks. So motivation can be extrinsic or intrinsic, meaning from being internal or external to self. It can be direct or delayed payoff, meaning that if you earn money, it's direct payoff, or if you think that by doing the task you get experience that it will pay you later is delayed payoff. It can be extrinsic social, like action significance, or if you have obligations to do a task. It can be intrinsic, community based, meaning that you do the task because you get identification, you get social contact, or it's because of altruism, like the examples are Samasource or Free Rice, that you answer English language questions that somehow like teaches you English, and at the same time you're donating rice for every correct response. It can be fun. Fun is an important motivation. Like that's why a lot of people work on gamification these days. And fun can be divided into skill variety, task identity, task autonomy, direct feedback from the job, or just passing time. So a very simplistic view tells us that the more you pay people, you get better work or better quality work. But it's not really, or you motivate people more, but it's not really the case. It has been shown that extrinsic monetary incentives are weak reinforcers in short run, and even negative reinforcers in long run. So there were studies that, for instance, when they monetized the somehow the research advancements for instance, some academics, the scholars in Australia. That's a good example. Is that they said that they pay the Australian professors or researchers per papers published or some kind of measurable, let's say, parameter. So in the short run, it actually increased the number of papers and it boosted somehow their activity. But in the long run, when they looked at it after years, they found that it actually reduced the quality of their work. So more money might attract more people, but not necessarily leading to better quality work. This was also observed when they did the study on mechanical Turk, and they paid, like for the same task they paid different amount of money, and they found that the more they paid, the job was done faster, but the quality didn't improve. So here I'm going to talk about Amazon Mechanical Turk. I'm sure Marta is going to give you some examples, real examples that you can see from the website. But just to give you the concept, a Mechanical Turk, which is a marketplace for online work, you have two sides. You have the requesters and you have the workers. The requesters are the people who have piecemeal tasks that they want it to be done and they want to pay for it. And the online workers are the people who want to do the tasks and earn money. So what do they have on each side? And what it is. So Mechanical Turk is it was founded by Amazon for its own purpose, which was to verify their own images and to somehow check their online retail stuff. It's artificial intelligence. It's inspired. The title was inspired by this the story of this faked machine chess player, which was being actually moved into different towns in Europe and was playing chess with people, and they were claiming that it's a machine, but in reality there was a short person inside the box who was playing chess. So it was artificial intelligence. And Amazon Mechanical Turk is the same thing. So when you as a requester, when you go to the system, you see this as a system that solves your problems, but there are actually humans sitting in the system. So that's why it's called Mechanical Turk. So the procedures that are in place for requesters and for workers to somehow be protected and can get what they want are not really balanced here. So one is that workers are anonymous. So they just somehow, maybe this gives them some immunity. But what happens if requesters are not satisfied with the task? They can review what is done on tasks and reject and not pay for them. So this kind of opens the door to some abusive people or requesters who would give their task and then they don't pay for it. So what happens to them? Workers have some forums, and they even have some add-ons and browsers that they report the abusive requesters, or requesters who reject their task inconsistently or without giving justification. And that way other workers will be alerted, and they don't take any hit or any task from those requesters. So that way, if a requester becomes abusive, then he won't get any worker to do his job. It's a reputation-driven system, meaning that a person as a worker, the more tasks or human intelligent tasks, it's called hit. The more hit a worker does, and the more of these hits gets accepted, then he will have a higher chance to get better hits from the requesters, because requesters can filter out their workers to do the tasks based on the hit acceptance rate, hit submission rate, and approval rate. The requesters can also do geographical filtering, meaning that, for instance, you are interested in the opinion of, for instance, U.S. general public on your product. You can filter out workers only from the U.S. So you can make only the U.S. workers eligible to work on your heat. There are also qualifications in place. So requesters can assign qualifications to the workers. This can be done, for instance, based on some tests. So you can actually design a test and make workers do the test to see if they can pass the test. And if they pass that test, you give them the like you generate a title for your qualification, and you generate a score, and you give them a certain score, and then that makes them eligible to actually take some of your hits and do them, that they need that certain type of skill. You can also assign qualifications to workers based on their performance on the previous hits. So here's a snapshot of the requester's dashboard. As you can see, you can just use the web-based interface, and there are even some templates, as you can see, for data collection, categorization, sentiment analysis, survey, things like that, that you can go and change to use for your own tasks. It also has a management dashboard where you can, as a requester, you can go and see how your hits are being done, and how they are actually being processed and progressed. On the other hand, on the worker side, the workers can, what the workers see is like this. They see different hits listed. They can filter it by the hits that they are actually qualified for, and look into how much they pay and how much time they want, and they can even review what the hit is and then accept them and do them. And they can also see who the requester is. So as a requester, which is where we usually stand, we have three choices into how to manage mechanical torque, either through the dashboard, command line interface, or API. So the dashboard is very easy to use. It's fast and easy. But it's very difficult to maintain for a large-scale system or experiment. The command line interface is easier for somebody who is a computer scientist somehow to manage a larger scale setting or problem. But if you really want to do some large experiments that are interactive, and you want to actually accept the hits automatically, then you need to use the API. And the Amazon Mechanical Torque API is a part of the whole Amazon Cloud Service API. There are also, just to give you some insight, there are also wrappers around the Mechanical Torque API in Amazon. There are Python wrappers, and there are other ones that, if you are interested, you can find them online easily. So what are the problems? So as a requester, you have two main problems. One is the heat completion time. So you want your heats to be done very fast, but they might not get done very fast, depending on how much money you pay. And Mechanical Torque or any of these mainstream crowdsourcing platforms, they are anonymous markets which are prone to cheat and spam. So if you actually leave your task completely open, like don't ask for any qualification or anything, you are likely to get spammers, which are robots actually giving random response, and they know that a lot of requesters don't have the resources to review the hits, and they just accept all of them, and that way they can earn money. And there are also people who don't really do the task, and they just there are people who are giving random results or copy and paste from some text, and they submit with the hope that the task will be accepted without review. So in response to these problems, there are some solutions that are being used now. So one standard one is to use the gold standard hits, meaning the hits that you know their answer, and you mix them in with your other hits and use them as honeypots to actually to verify people who are actually not doing the work. You can also take advantage of redundancy. You can give the same hit to different people and then cross-check. At the same time, you should be careful that the workers who are doing the task for you, they are human. So you should build trust with them and exchange ideas. You should always leave them some space to give you feedback. So maybe there's something wrong with your design, and maybe there's something is broken. Maybe your server is broken, is down, so the video is not shown, so they can't do the task. So you should always leave a channel open for them to communicate. You should be careful about the design of your hits, that they are clear and understandable. The other tools that the requesters have, one of the most important ones is filtering. So you can look at, you can actually use the approval rate, how many hits has been accepted from a certain worker. So you can set that your hit can be done only with people who have the approval rate of 95%, for instance. That reduces the number of spammers. You can use the geographical restriction if you care about some specific criteria. You can have this qualification test or assign qualifications. That also helps to filter out more lower quality workers. Throughout doing experiments, you should identify spammers and cheaters and generate a list and ban them from your future experiments. And eventually, what you can do as the best solution or winning solution for your experiments on mechanical Turk or Crowdsourcing or anything like that is to use a hybrid solution. You have to use any means that are actually available to you, any tool that is available to you to improve the quality of your work to get the best result. So you have to think truly about the design from the start to the end to get the best answer. And you should always first run a pilot hit. You should submit a small number to see how the Turkers or workers respond before publishing all the work and making it available to people to do the task. Because you might make a mistake and then you have to spend a lot of money and not getting the result you want. So these are actually the points I mentioned before. You should, as a requester, you should be aware that there are forums like Turkish Nation. It's even good to go take a look at the forum, and sometimes you can even go and ask and invite the Turkers to participate in your hit there and tell them about your hit, and you can get good responses. If you ever reject people's hits, it's good to provide reasons for them. If they ask for it, you should respond and say why their hits were being rejected, and you can tell them what they should be doing not to get rejected next time. And you should be careful that workers are human, so you can't just count that, okay, I have a task that can be done in 2 seconds. That means that 1800 of these tasks can be done in 1 hour. It's like human being, it's not a machine. They can't do repetitive tasks and boring tasks forever. So you can't count the price of your task based on the hits being done really in 2 seconds. So what we can do with mechanical Turk? So we know that it's relatively easy to set up compared to complicated machine learning algorithms. It can be cheap if you use a good strategy, especially compared to lab-based experiments on how much you have to pay to people to actually do your tasks on site. And there are certain examples that they take advantage of crowdsourcing these days a lot, like audio transcription, sentiment analysis, image annotation, and also generating traffic to websites. So what you can ask for the crowdsourcing workers or workers to do, especially the multimedia, it can be divided into 2 different types of tasks. The mechanical tasks, the hits that they have verifiable answers. So for instance, you want to ask if there is a flower in this image or not, or if there is a mountain in this image or not. So that's a mechanical task because you can be sure that there is a ground truth, there is a response that is correct, and there is a response that is incorrect. I mean, there can be some fuzzy, ambiguous cases, but usually there is an answer. And on the other hand, there are subjective judgments that are also important for you to get the human response. Those are actually the ones that you can never do with computers. So for instance, you want to ask people how they feel about some design, or if they like something or not, or if they understand something. So it can be human perception, it can be their opinion, it can be their preference. And the second part that we can only do with humans is also very tricky, because since there is no gold standard, there is no ground truth, verifiable ground truth, then it makes it very difficult to actually be sure if the workers are giving you the right, honest response or not. So these Martha is going to give more examples from the real-world research papers on how crowdsourcing is used for multimedia. But briefly, crowdsourcing in practice can be used for creating ground truths for evaluating multimedia content analysis algorithms. As I said, for instance, for object detection, you want to see certain object is in the video or in the image. And it can even be used for generating meaningful new problems to address by discovering users' needs. So you can even go and ask people's intentions and ask people's feelings and things like that you couldn't be doing before on a large scale. And let's say by the limited resources we have to go and somehow attack those new problems. To summarize, crowdsourcing is expanding and specializing. There are more and more platforms that are specialized in, for instance, translating, transcription, and they have the workers who are specialized in that topic. There are certainly limitations because some advantages that exist in real job markets or work markets, like advancement and stuff, is less present in these platforms, that they have their own problems. But there are still a lot of opportunities, still in its early stages. Especially mechanical Turk is something that Amazon used internally, and then they didn't really care that much to improve it. So and I'm sure there are other ones that are coming out that can be used certainly in a better way. Crowdsourcing can be used and combined in a hybrid system with computing power, and if we can take the human being as a human computational unit and somehow combine their power with the computers, then we can get a much smarter systems, and we can do much more than what we are able to achieve right now. And certainly, as any system that deals with human, there are ethical concerns about the workers being abused, or as you can imagine, for instance, in ODS, when you can ask people to to capture their image with the webcam, there are also privacy concerns. So here's a list of the references that I used. So you can, the first one is a weblog that always posts about crowdsourcing. It gives very interesting blog posts. Thank you for your attention.